he says, a recent Russian defector named Bokhan, who was attached to the Soviet embassy in Athens from 1968 to 1975, and was a member of the GRU being Soviet military intelligence, as opposed to the KGB, confirmed that the GRU was orchestrating terrorist acts both in Greece and abroad with the aim of creating subversion and terror worldwide. Now there you have a smoking gun. This has been in the public domain, this book, since 1986. This is a highly, Gail Rivers, a New Zealander trained in the Special Forces, says in the flap, is an articulate man of high principle who has risked his life many times in the counter-terrorist war on 5 continents. Now, this is not an idle statement. Everything in this book, by the way, that I've read is absolutely first class. So here we have a statement by an expert who knew this, that the Soviet military intelligence are behind the terror network, the terror operation. Now, the KGB, of course, is also military intelligence, and they're interlinked. Yes. So while the distinction is valid, it's also invalid in the sense that the other name for the Soviet military intelligence is, in fact, the first chief directorate. So Soviet military intelligence is behind the global terror offensive, which is a very key element of the long-range strategy. Now, why has this been totally ignored by the media and by our governments? The British government and the American government have said absolutely nothing about this. Why is this?
Well, and it's come to the point now where supposedly the leadership of the new democratic Russia is enlisted by the American government to be our advisors, consultants, and partners in fighting and stopping world terrorism.
Absolutely right.
The very network which since the 60s, under the visible leadership of Yasser Arafat, the Soviet KGB and GRU have controlled. And unfortunately, we've come to a state of affairs today where the Bush administration, as was the case with prior administrations, is giving over $1 billion a year to the communist PLO specifically to administer its takeover of part of Israel, and we're forcing them on Israel. We're protecting Yasser Arafat from being disturbed or removed by the Israeli government, and we're maintaining the continuity of this Soviet-controlled terror network, supposedly years after communism disappeared from the planet.
Yes, and it's gone even further, because we now have a prime minister of the Palestinian Authority, whose name is Abu Mazen. That's his code name. His real name is Mahmoud Abbas. Now, this man was, quote, was, in quotes, in control of Hamas, the most devious and most egregious terrorist arm of the PLO. All of a sudden, this man is persona grata in all Western capitals, in Washington, London, and Brussels. And he is the new Mr. Democracy. Now, why is this? And the answer to this is that, as has happened in the past, this man has been bribed. He has been paid very substantial sums of black operations money to change his tune in order to suit the objectives of the Western manipulators who are trying to sort of achieve whatever their objective is. And
well, in a way, remember, Gorbachev lost credibility as an alleged reformer when it was obvious that he was still a Leninist and still promoting Leninist strategy. So they had to bring in a new performer, Yeltsin, to appear to be more likable to the West, and we had to definitely support him for fear that some other maniac would come to power. So in essence, we got the same thing here. It's a puppet show. You've got Arafat and a puppet working in the PLO leadership, and it gives the United States government the excuse to support the puppet.
Don't forget that Mrs. Thatcher said to me, when talking about Gorbachev, whom she knew very well, she said, he's not a Leninist anymore, she said to me.
But he said he was.
He said he was a Leninist in all his speeches, which I've read.
He never hesitated to admit it.
He took every opportunity to say, I am a Leninist, I've always been a Leninist, I will always be a Leninist. I've been a communist since I was born, and I will always remain a communist, and we will never diverge from the communist path.
And after he left his role in the Soviet Union of ushering in this post-Stalinist pretense and performance of the new phase, the fourth program of the Soviet strategy, he came to the United States and continued to promote Leninist strategy, and is still doing so today, well-funded and supported, promoting world government and worldwide controls in the name of environmentalism.
Yes, through an outfit called the Gorbachev Foundation, which consists entirely of Soviet apparatchiks. And by the way, was involved with an outfit called the State of the World Forum, which when translated from Lenin speak means World State Forum.
Yes.
Anyway, we need to talk about Saddam Hussein.
Yes, and as a major example of the fact that there has been no real change in the Soviet Union since 1989 and worldwide in other communist countries, the international terror network controlled by the KGB continues just as active, and it is inconceivable that any alleged group like Al-Qaeda or any alleged terrorist operative like Osama bin Laden could ever function independent of this network.
That is absolutely true, and indeed all honest experts acknowledge that it is impossible for any of these operations to take place, particularly the 9/11 one, without the support of a major power. Now, in this connection, we have certain information. First of all, as you know, Saddam Hussein was in business with very important forces in the United States for at least 10 years. This is true.
And was a major recipient of U.S. government funding and support.
That's right.
Because when we turned Iran, the United States government turned Iran over to the communists and made an enemy state of that, the United States government had the excuse to support Iraq and Saddam Hussein, although controlled by the Soviet military, support him as an alleged buffer against Iran.
Right. But Iraq is very important because it's quite clear that what's been happening in Iraq is not what you read in the newspapers. Now, I mentioned black operations money just now, and we can't go into that in much detail here, but the fact is that under the first Bush administration, an enormous sum of money was raised from 200 banks based abroad, all of them foreign banks. The sum of money concerned is so enormous that it could not have been raised for any other purpose than the implementation of what I call the new underworld order, if you like. They actually raised 18 trillion, but the objective was to raise 29.8 trillion. And this money, of course, is multiplied, and there's this huge sort of pool of black operations money which is parked offshore. I mean, this is a separate subject on its own, but I just wanted to give that background in order to come to the point.
Can we understand this in summary as the extension of the KGB strategy of functioning as the Russian mafia and extending criminalism as a strategy into Western intelligence services?
Absolutely.
Okay,
that's
part of it.
There's been a merger of intelligence services, both vertically and horizontally. If you like, vertically, with both their own underground criminalist classes and with foreign underground criminalist classes. And the intelligence services are working together. In fact, Condoleezza Rice herself said the other day, "We are allies of Russia," which is a theme. Were those her exact words? Something like that. She said something similar to that. What she actually means by that is that our intelligence services are hand in glove with the Soviet intelligence services. Now, Saddam Hussein was very important in this operation. Obviously, we don't know everything that we need to know. But at some point, as happens among thieves and among these crooks, they fall out. And there was a falling out between Saddam Hussein and his criminal network and the American criminal operatives at a very, very high level in the American government. And American intelligence, by the way, has a particular speciality, which is to set up their next enemy. And this is something that you commented to me privately about last night, which is apparently been going on for a long time. But I found this out when I was looking at certain documents, and I found that Milosevic, the Yugoslav dictator, had been engaged in business operations with 2 or 3 CIA Section 18 corporations, that is to say corporations owned by the American government, set up by the CIA.